For more analysis on Trump's visit, let's bring in John Kavulich. He's a political commentator speaking to us from New York. John, always good to have you on the program. So there's always been the special relationship between the UK and the United States, but two state visits since January is quite unprecedented. What's the British government trying to tell Trump by the state visit and this show of pageantry that we've seen over the last few hours?
Well, if we have to define it by one word, the word is going to be ego, and it's going to be massaging the ego of President Trump. You have two colliding narratives. For supporters of President Trump, this visit, the second state visit, is about respect. It's about the respect that he has brought back to the United States. And so heads of state and heads of government and monarchs throughout the world want him because of respect. To detractors, it's one of bullying. And the only reason he has this is because Keir Starmer needed something from him, and he knows what he had to do to appeal to get it. And so you have those two, competing narratives, and it's not really difficult to get inside the head of King Charles and imagine him looking out the window as President Trump was arriving this morning and saying, that this is a vulgar and ghastly human being, but I have a duty to do.
Exactly, and that's the duty that comes with being a royal and giving Trump the royal treatment, so to speak, because of what happens on Thursday, that meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. And, you speak about ego and respect for those who are saying it's a good thing that Trump is there on a second state visit, but doesn't this all just come down to also money and business for the UK? The economy isn't doing well. The Labour Party, Keir Starmer, is not doing well. They need that close relationship with the United States as the biggest economy in the world.
Absolutely true. So the political reality is that the Starmer government has challenges. It has challenges in terms of massive budget shortfalls. And ironically, the approximate $45 billion in budget shortfall that they project during the next 5 years, 15 billion of that is money that the Starmer government has promised to Ukraine. So a third of the shortage is going to Ukraine. So he's going to try to, get as much out of President Trump as possible. You have the issues relating to Gaza, where there isn't going to be a meeting of the minds between Keir Starmer and President Trump on issues relating to the state of Israel. And then you have the localized issues where President Trump looks at those protesters in London and outside of the walls of Windsor Castle relating to Ukraine, relating to Palestine, relating to just the relationship with the U.S. He sees those people as enemies, and they should be locked up. Now you look at the Keir Starmer government, and recently they've been moving to squash and prevent and diminish protests that are taking place throughout the country, including a large one a week ago. So you have all of this colliding, and the Starmer government, needs U.S. companies to want to be interested in the UK. Some banks are opening expanded offices. You have some tech companies that are making announcements. Some of these announcements, though, were happening anyway. And it's not a criticism, because this is what governments do. They tee up projects and make announcements over and over again so they can connect them to the particular visit. And that's what the Starmer government's doing. The question, though, is it going to be enough once President Trump leaves to have some additional energy to carry forward the Starmer government?
Absolutely, because it will be so interesting to hear what Donald Trump has to say about much of what is happening in the UK. It was just over the weekend we saw those protests by the likes of Tommy Robinson calling for less immigration to the UK. And now, of course, today we're seeing the anti-Trump demonstrations, which one would think Trump would be fine with, considering he is such an advocate of freedom of speech, regardless of which side it comes from. And what I also found very interesting, that last week after the death of Charlie Kirk, the murder rather, it was Keir Starmer was one of the first people to actually send his condolences and put out a statement. Could that possibly also have been because he knew that this state visit was coming up from Donald Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. And the recently departed ambassador from the UK to the US, Lord Mendelsohn, you can sort of see his fingers in that sort of response that, hey, Prime Minister, get this out fast. It doesn't matter whether you believe a word of it, but you get it out there. And that's pretty much, what we've seen with heads of state and heads of government relating to the murder of Charlie Cook. Again, the challenge that Keir Starmer is going to have is there are a lot of issues that are domestic. And when it comes to voters, when it comes to protesters, they're generally looking local. And President Trump will leave. There'll be a lot of relief. I can imagine in Downing Street and at Windsor Castle, there are two clocks, and they're both countdown clocks, and they're countdown to when President Trump leaves tomorrow evening. And they still have him there. He's not addressing the parliament, which the Starmer government was absolutely horrified to think of what could be during that address. So that's out. But President Trump will be giving remarks at the state dinner tonight. And that's a real challenge, because there are written remarks that will be either in front of him or on a teleprompter. And then there's what he wants to add. And it's what he wants to add that can come off the rails. And for King Charles, President Trump and he disagree on climate. President Trump, he and disagree on the environment, disagree on Gaza, disagree on Ukraine. Just the list goes on and on. And he's just going to have to sit there and try to manage through it.
Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to watch later on. John Kavulich, political commentator, speaking to us there from New York. Great to get your opinion.